All right, hello everybody. Frankie here with an update from AOC on the $1.2 trillion infrastructure package and the fate of the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill.
Why is there an effort to link them both and make sure that the big bill doesn't get delayed indefinitely after the small bill passes?
Yeah, so I completely agree with you that a lot of this discussion about process and tit for tat just is very difficult to follow and doesn't really cover the heart of this conversation, which is that we have two bills at present, one which underfunds most priorities across the board. So there are very few priorities that even get the full funding that they even need. And then there is the larger, what is known as the budget bill, reconciliation bill. That has the stuff that you're going to feel in your everyday life. Universal pre-K. We're talking about college, community colleges. We're talking about expansion of Medicare. And we're debating including vision and dental in Medicare, conversations about lowering the age of it, robust climate action, renewable energy. All of that stuff that you're going to feel in your everyday life is in what is known as the Build Back Better Act, aka the reconciliation bill. Now, when we were discussing the scope of this bill way earlier in the year, this is the original infrastructure bill. And we have a vast majority of Democrats, about 96%, that are in agreement of the entire agenda. Now, a very small handful of Democrats, about 4% of the party, are trying to essentially split these two priorities up. And I personally don't think it's an accident that the ones that a lot of lobbyists love are in the much smaller, underfunded bill that don't make prescription drugs easier to buy and more affordable, et cetera. And what they want to do is split them apart, force a vote on the first one. And because we have such narrow margins in the Senate and the House, the read that we have is that they'll just dump the second one, leave the other one out to dry, and just never actually vote on it. And so the way that we bring our two parts of the caucus together is by saying, you know what? My bill is bound up in your bill, and your bill is bound up in my bill. So do I love this very, what I would argue a conservative underfunded bill? No. But I will vote for it if we pursue them both together. But what we should not take is this approach, which is what people are trying to do by forcing a vote tomorrow on an under-considered, under-amended bill by itself, by saying, we want to force this vote right now, and it's either my way or the highway. You don't work together. I want your vote, but I will give you nothing for it. Your community will not benefit from this as much as mine will. We don't have to pursue that route. We can, instead of saying it's either mine or yours, we can say both of us can succeed together. And that is the case that the Progressive Caucus is making. But if we vote for this bill tomorrow, Rachel, and I want to be very clear about this, if we vote for this underfunded, too small infrastructure bill alone, instead of voting for it with the rest of the president's agenda, if we vote for it alone, it could make our climate crisis worse, and it risks being the only or the last substantive piece of legislation that we will pass. I do not believe, we do not have the assurances necessary to believe in good faith that reconciliation will pass if infrastructure passes tomorrow, because it gives that small, narrow margin of Democrats that have, really been making this process quite difficult. There was an overall agreement between the process 2 months ago, and then there was a reneging of that. And so if we can just stick to our original plan, stick to the promises we've made each other, we can proceed in good faith and transform the lives of millions of Americans for the better.
Do you feel optimistic that it'll happen?
I do feel optimistic because the Progressive Caucus, and not just the Progressive Caucus, but we are now seeing a lot more Democrats, even not part of the Progressive Caucus, join and say, you know what? Childcare, healthcare, the climate crisis, this is too important to shelve. It's too important to shelve. And I also want to really thank people at home for supporting House Democrats who do not accept corporate PAC and lobbyist money. And those sorts of Democrats are not just progressive, they're not just conservative, they really transcend a lot of party ideology, but they're a recent phenomenon and that have really been surging since 2016 and 2018. And I really do believe that that is what is changing the dynamic that we're seeing in Washington today, where that stranglehold that lobbyists have traditionally had over Washington, that still very much do in a lot of sectors, is starting to loosen because everyday American voters and everyday people at home are starting to support members of Congress and send members to Congress that don't just do what lobbyists tell them to do, but say, we're going to make tough decisions.
Okay, so now I'll take you to Nancy Pelosi, who is also guaranteeing there will be a reconciliation bill.
So now you've come here about what else comes next. We have two items that were, well, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the BIF, and of course the reconciliation. I just told members of my leadership that the reconciliation bill was a culmination of my service in Congress because it was about the children, the children, the children, the children. Their health, it's about health, their education, the economic security of their families, a clean, safe environment in which they could thrive, and I guess a world at peace in which they could succeed. This is more about the domestic first poor parts of that. So remove all doubt in anyone's mind that we will not have a reconciliation. We will have a reconciliation bill. That is for sure. Today, the question is about, we are proceeding in a very positive way to bring up the bill of the BIF, to do so in a way that can win. And so far, so good for today. It's going in a positive direction. It's impossible, though, to persuade people to vote for the BIF without the reassurances that the reconciliation bill will occur, and it will. And that we cannot, because of rules of the Senate in terms of parliamentarian having to pass on any bill before it comes to the floor and pass on any language, we cannot really guarantee what I'd hoped in terms of having a more legislative form, but nonetheless, the framework that if it's okay with the President of the United States, who has this vision for our country. As I've told you before, he said, I want to work on the bipartisan bill for infrastructure, but I will not confine my vision for America to what is in there. We have to build back better, and to do so in a way that honors our climate goals, honoring our responsibility to our children to convey this planet in a responsible way. That does so, that respects the needs of, the opportunities for working families with issues. It's all jobs, green technology, jobs for women in the workplace, dads who may need home help. So all the things, child tax credit, child tax care, child care issues that relate to universal pre-K, home health services. If you have a senior or person with disabilities in your home, some of you know this, you've heard it every time you come here, but I just want to make sure that it is reinforced as to why this is important, because it's jobs for women, it's jobs for people who have been previously underrepresented. Build back better. So when you build the infrastructure of America, you're doing so with a workforce that has workforce development, can be involved in those decisions. And it has a justice to it that the president has insisted upon, that we're not building in ways in the past that have separated communities and perpetuated environmental injustice, but instead build back better with justice.